Welcome, JCT TV. This is Bible study for the 21st century. I'm going to take time with this one because today we're looking at the Transfiguration, this remarkable event when Jesus was transfigured on Mount Hermon with Peter, James, and John as witnesses, with Elijah and Moses talking with him in his transfigured state. It's an amazing story, and I'll get right to it after this.
Very few African mothers ever see a doctor or midwife, yet each mother knows how fragile her child's life is. You see, 26,000 children under the age of 5 will die today because they don't have access to medical care. Your gift of $260, just $22 every month, helps stock a mobile clinic and train healthcare workers to care for young mothers and their children during pregnancy and preschool years. Join WOW Mother Care now. Protect the life of a mother and her child.
The Transfiguration. Let's read it first of all, and then I'm going to just go through it, and I'm going to take my time. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter answered and said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." And while he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. And suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Hear him." And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid. But Jesus came and touched them and said, "Arise and do not be afraid." When they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Okay. A number of things here I need to point out. First of all, 6 days. After 6 days. There's no, don't read something, people who try to read numerical stuff in the scripture, my eyes glaze over, okay? I'm not there. They're basically just resting and having, a bit of a retreat. Probably camped under some beautiful trees in the shade, right by one of those marvelous streams of water that spring out of the ground in what we now know as Banias, but in Jesus' time, Caesarea Philippi. Like I said a few shows ago, I've been there many times. When I lived in Israel, I used to drive by there every week when I was going up to southern Lebanon to broadcast from a radio station in a war zone. And it was just part of my turf, if you will, part of my neighborhood. I've been there often taking friends and relatives, sometimes taking an occasional tour group who came to Jerusalem, and they asked me to spend a day with them, and I said, well, you got to see Caesarea Philippi. This is where the great confession of faith was made by Peter, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." But 6 days, this was not a spiritual retreat. This was just, Jesus and the disciples lived a very intense life. You can just imagine being surrounded by a thronging, dusty mob of thousands of people all the time. Enough to just wear anybody out. So, after they've kind of gathered themselves, 6 days of just unwinding, Jesus says to Peter, James, and John, "Come with me." And they climb Mount Hermon, 10,000 feet. Matthew doesn't tell us how high up they went, but they're up there somewhere. At some point, Jesus just kind of says, okay, guys, just stay here for a minute. And he walks maybe 100 steps or whatever away. And suddenly, it's as though lightning has struck. He's clothed in brilliance and light. And even as they're shading their eyes from this, they discern two other figures standing with him, and they're talking with one another. And Matthew doesn't say if they recognized them right then. I think they did. Nevertheless, who was it? It was Moses and Elijah. Now, Moses, of course, is basically he is the ultimate, prophet founder of the Hebrew faith, even though Abraham is the ultimate father. Elijah, probably the most outstanding of all the Old Testament prophets. And as you know, if you studied the Bible at all, Elijah didn't die. He was, as the word is used, translated. That is, he just shifted from time and space to the eternities in this remarkable heavenly chariot of fire. Elisha, his pupil and student, the one he'd mentored to replace him, watches in amazement as all of this happens. And as far as Moses is concerned, Jewish tradition tells us that he never died, although Deuteronomy tells us he was buried. So we don't know. But the point is, even like the burial spot, it remains to this day to be a mystery. So tradition built that maybe he too had somehow just kind of walked from space and time into the eternities. I'm not saying he had been, but that's Jewish tradition. It's interesting that one of the paraphrases of the scriptures is called the Targum. It's the Jerusalem Targum in Exodus chapter 12. Connects the coming of Messiah with Moses. And there's another Jewish tradition that predicts that his appearance would be with Elijah. And the tradition was that Elijah actually would precede him, and then he, the Messiah, would appear. Jesus will address that a little later with regard to John the Baptist. In Peter's case, he probably thought that the final age had come. And what Jesus had just said a few hours ago, some of you standing here will not see death before you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Here it is. And you know what? He was right in the sense that seeing Jesus transfigured, seeing him in his heavenly status, if you will, as Son of God, was something that never happened before. No prophet preceding him had ever seen this before. Why wouldn't he believe this is it? This is the kingdom come. There was an expectation that at the end of days, and Peter is now thinking this is it, there was this expectation that all the nations would come up to Jerusalem during the Feast of Tabernacles. And of course, the Feast of Tabernacles was characterized by booths, shelters. Not really tents, but shelters. And to this day, during the Feast of Tabernacles, wherever you go in Jerusalem, and I have so many Israeli friends, and whenever I would visit their homes when I lived there, for the period of the Feast of Tabernacles in the fall, on their balcony, they would have 4 standards and a flat roof of palm fronds, a little open here and there so you could see through according to the scriptures and see the stars. And you would dwell in these shelters to remember the 40 years wandering in the wilderness. So Peter figures, this is it, it's come. Let's build 3 sukkot. It's called a sukkah, and plural is sukkot, for a shelter, temporary shelter. Let's build 3 sukkot, because this means that you have come to dwell among men, and that was the tradition. God would dwell among men during the Feast of Tabernacles. 3 tabernacles, that's what that means, okay? Well, Jesus wasn't about to endorse that. In fact, Jesus says nothing. You know, really, when you think about it, what in the world is Peter doing here? I mean, this amazing thing is happening before their eyes. Jesus transfigured before them, transformed into his heavenly being, Son of God, with Elijah, with Moses. It's a holy, sacred, heaven on earth moment. Peter's voice must have sounded in that sacred moment like a donkey braying. Because at that moment, God the Father intervenes. While he was still speaking, still braying away, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Suddenly a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." Peter, be quiet, will you? Hear him. Pardon me. Listen to him. Peter, James, and John are absolutely flattened by the cloud and the voice. I don't know why they hadn't been flattened by the transfiguration itself, but this is something that transcends the transfiguration. This is God, the Father himself, descending on this scene. And it's a wonder that they even lived. And they're down there, face in the dust, absolutely petrified. Matthew doesn't tell us how long this took, but suddenly they're aware that Jesus is touching them. And they dare to lift their heads and look up. Oh, it's you. Like we've known you, Son of Man. This was remarkable. Before I talk about the significance of the Transfiguration, let me just comment on something that Luke tells us. In chapter 9, verse 31, Luke tells us that when Elijah and Moses were talking with Jesus, they were talking about his decease, what he was to suffer, and his departure, if you will, from the earth back into heaven. His exodus, if you will, from this life. And what I find interesting is that Moses and Elijah accepted, obviously, what the disciples would not accept. What Peter himself had said, "No, Lord, this will not happen to you," just a few hours previously, to the point where Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan. You didn't hear this from God." His suffering, his death. This was not Messiah talk, as far as the disciples were concerned. And yet Moses and Elijah weren't fazed. Why? Because even though they weren't God, they, from their perspective in the heavenlies, were aware of the unfolding plan. They knew the Son of Man must suffer and die, as Jesus himself had begun to warn the disciples. I got to suffer, I got to die. I got to be buried. But I will rise again. Something they couldn't grasp. And to give them their due, would you grasp it? Would I grasp it? If one of your good friends, someone you deeply admired, were to say, "You know what, I'm going to die, but don't weep for me, because 3 days later, I'll rise again." Ooh, really? So let's cut the disciples some slack. This transfiguration event confirmed a lot of things. First of all, it confirmed the incarnation. God made flesh, dwelling among us, full of grace and truth. Incarnation, and again, I'm no language scholar, but incarnate, in flesh, incarnation, infleshment, essentially is what incarnation means. God became man in that humble birth scene in the cave in Bethlehem. This little body was laid in a manger, and a manger means manger, French, to eat. It's where the animals ate. It's where the grain was put in that they ate. And Mary kind of pushed remaining bits of grain and other seeds out of there, and some of the swaddling clothes, she provided a little bit of a mattress and then wrapped the baby and put him in there. I mean, this is God made flesh. Really? It confirmed what the angels said in the shepherd's field, even while Mary was wrapping her newborn baby in swaddling clothes. Peace on earth, goodwill to men, brilliant light from heaven, beautiful music. Again, you think, whoa, there's never been peace on earth. How can this be? The incarnation prefigured the transfiguration. The very glories of heaven that were revealed as the angels sang in the shepherd's fields were revealed again on Mount Hermon in the transfiguration, telling us that God has indeed broken into space and time, not only through the incarnation, the Son of God, but the Son of Man, but also through Son of God, both flesh and spirit, fully man, fully God. And that's why we can understand Jesus when he says, the kingdom of heaven is among you, referring to himself. You want the kingdom, fellas? Here it is. Look, see, shake my hand. Hello. I am the kingdom. I am God's signature on the kenosis, the self-emptying of Philippians chapter 2. And Peter remembers this event eventually as God's majesty revealed.
The work of the Word of God is stunningly remarkable. We must understand that God has placed His life codes of salvation and healing in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Jim Cantelon is focused on the messages that God has communicated through the Bible to you and me. Today, it's more important for us now that we learn what God is saying to us. God has placed us here now to be examples and to share the good news of His work with the world today. If you've heard the Divine Mind speak to you through this program, then God has worked in amazing ways to reveal His Word. Remember that this program has cost, and we have been faithful to God to bring this program to you. If you want to give an offering in any amount, we would appreciate it. Send to Jim Cantelon today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. Or call us at 519-415-8341. Or simply visit jimcantelontoday.com.
Remote and rural, these children and their families have no access to medical care. There is no clinic nearby. And when a mother is desperate to save her dying child, she will walk for many hours. Sometimes the child doesn't survive. So we go to them. These tables and chairs under the trees look like a gathering, not a medical clinic. But the doctors and nurses are transforming the lives of the children and their families. They provide primary medical care, classes on sanitation, medicines, and a better understanding of HIV and AIDS. Most of all, they bring hope as they diagnose, treat, and educate families. This clinic is a gift from donors that will transform their lives. You can become part of that transformation. Your gift of $25 will provide health care for an entire family. $100 provides care for 6 families. Be a part of real change. Go to wowmission.ca/saveachild.
I want to extemporize here for a few minutes. You know, as I think about Peter, James, and John, and this experience of seeing Jesus transfigured, the only thing that could top it in their experience was what will come later. And that was seeing Jesus, the resurrected Lord, suddenly appearing in their room of hiding, showing them his hands and feet, and convincing them that he was indeed risen from the dead. I mean, these were pivotal moments in their spiritual development. But what I find absolutely, I guess, beyond me, is how these guys could see and experience what they saw and experienced, what they heard from God the Father himself on Mount Hermon, with not only the transfigured Christ and Elijah and Moses, but then this brilliant cloud descending from heaven, and the voice of God the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him." How could they ever allow that absolutely transcendent moment to be eclipsed by fear for their lives? Well, obviously it happened. A few months later, as Jesus is being arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, after Peter, again, brutally blunt Peter, tries to slice off the head of one of the temple guards, and the guy ducks, and Peter doesn't aim very well and just gets his ear. But even after that brave moment, when Jesus is being taken to being tried before the temple authorities, he runs away. So do the rest of them. He follows at a distance and kind of works his way to the outer courts of Caiaphas' house. And there, because it was cold, he gets close to the fire and he's warming his hands. And some little servant girl says, "Ooh, I know you. You're one of them." "I am not." "Oh, yes, you are. I've seen you with him." "No, I don't even know the man." And then he uttered some expletive deleted words. It's beyond me. Now, the resurrection is another story. When he gets the report from the women that they've been to the grave to, anoint the body, and he's not there, he doesn't believe it. It's only after the resurrection that he comes round. Now, what about you? What about me? I'm thinking this. If I see Jesus transfigured before my very eyes, if I see him in his heavenly beauty and holiness and presence, in conversation with the two giants of my Jewish faith, Moses and Elijah, and if I, in fear and trepidation, see and experience this brilliant white cloud coming down on me and the voice of God the Father pushing me into the earth to the point where I think I'm going to die, well, you know what? For me, that's going to be a life-defining moment. Let's get back to what Jesus said to the Pharisees and the Sadducees when they said, "Show us a sign, and then we'll believe." Jesus knew they wouldn't believe. They just want another sign and another sign. And the disciples themselves proved that was the case. They weren't asking for a sign, but boy, did they get it. But even up to and after Jesus' crucifixion, they really didn't believe. It wasn't until the resurrected Christ appeared among them that they truly believed. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying this because some of you may say, "Well, you know what? I want to believe, I really do, but, I need some sign from heaven. No, you don't. Because a sign will never convince you. It won't. What you need is to pray the prayer that the humble tax collector prayed in the temple, as Jesus refers to him as he prays beside a self-sufficient, very proud, self-righteous Pharisee, saying, I thank you, God, I'm not as other men are, even like this tax collector. The tax collector can't even look up to heaven. He's got his face in the dirt. He's groaning and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. That's the entry-level prayer, friends. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. You don't need a sign. You need salvation. And that's where it starts.
Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 2 is here. The focus of this book is Matthew chapters 5 through 7, the Sermon on the Mount, called the greatest sermon of all time. Gain background and insight into the Beatitudes, being salt and light, how to love your enemies, and the Lord's Prayer. We'd like you to have your copy of Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 2. If you're already a monthly partner, it will be sent out to you automatically in the next few weeks. If you would like to order Volume 2, you can do so by sending a gift in any amount. Call us at 519-415-8341 or write to Jim Cantelon today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7, or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com. Request Cantelon's Casual Commentary Volume 2 and it will be sent to you.
I study hard, I do this with you, and I write. I'm writing Cantelon's Casual Commentary. I'm releasing it in these little booklet forms. Mind you, this is 68 pages, believe it or not. I do it in this shape so I can put it in an envelope, inexpensive to send to you. I really want you to have one. At the end of this study, we're going to have an entire book. You want your copy. Ask for it. And when you do, please do something to help support this show. We need your help, and thanks for that.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon today. P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click support.